Welcome, I am Kevin McDonald and you are watching Facets Television. Today with me is Tammy Tran, the founder and president of VietACT. VietACT is an organization in Orange County that is out to stop human trafficking. Thank you so much for coming in today, Tammy.
Thank you for having me today.
I want to start with, there's a lot of discussion going on in the world about human trafficking, and there's a lot of confusion in the minds of the public between sex trafficking as a particular element of human trafficking and the overall problem of human trafficking. Can you explain the difference for me?
I think, you know, a lot of people, I think if you ask 10 people, maybe 5 out of 10 know what human trafficking is. But I think if we describe it in the context of slavery, slavery exists everywhere. There is the biggest form, I mean, one that we often hear about is sex trafficking, you know, whether it's child trafficking into the tourism business, sex tourism business, or trafficking of women for prostitution. But a bigger form of trafficking, I think that doesn't often get a lot of attention, is labor trafficking. And that's happening all over the world. It's happening here in Orange County in California, that there are people who are trafficked and then become human slaves, working in very inhumane situations. So I think the confusion is that, you know, I think our human race or our society has come a long way, and slavery is something we've all learned about in grade school when we think about the American the slave movement situation in our history, but it still exists today, and it exists in even more egregious forms than it did than when we were learning about it in 4th grade.
I think it also, from what I've seen in the past 15 years, I mean, it's only become the soup du jour, I guess you could say, or the cause du jour lately, but I'm glad to see that it's getting attention, in that the slavery of the old days, you know, we have these images of a chain and a bracelet and so on and so forth, so people challenge how serious can someone be a slave when they're free to go to work and free to go on to stuff. What is your response to people who say, well, wait a minute, how can you be a slave and go to work and go home every day?
Well, I think, you know, we live in a world where everybody has a need to work in order to survive. And I think there are some people that are easily exploited. And they're in a situation when we talk, you know, international human trafficking, where they're trafficked from one place to another. And the basic way that they become a slave and still be able to go to work and go back to where they're held, is because a lot of these folks end up in a country outside of their home country.
So we were talking about the challenge that people have of understanding how you can be a free slave so much, as you're free to go, but you're still in slavery. I've seen a lot of the threats on family. You know, they say, if you don't do what I tell you, I'm going to kill your little brother or your little sister. Many of these people are taken from their home country to the U.S. And then in that process, one, they're now in culture shock. They don't know what to do. They may not have been raised in a society like this, where you go to the police or you get societal help. How do you, as an organization, help those people to help themselves, I guess would be a good question.
I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges, is that, I mean, there's no such thing as a free slave. I think when we think about a slave, we think about slaves being held in chains, and you can see the chains. But with human trafficking, you don't actually see the physical chains. The things that hold people or enslave them are things like holding their documents. You know, they may be here on a work visa. They may have a passport. So their captor will take away their passport, will take away the legal documents. So essentially, they're put in a situation where they're unlawfully here. Secondly, like you said, the power of threats against your family, against your loved ones, is very strong. You know, if you don't do this, if you don't continue to serve the clients, we're going to kill your kid, your husband, your parents. I mean, those things are the kind of things that make a human being a victim of human trafficking.
And that threat coming from somebody who has already shown a willingness to abuse, whether it's physically abuse or sexually abuse or induce drugs and alcohol under force.
Exactly.
Obviously, that threat comes with some reality, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. And it's part of a bigger system of exploitation. And I think that's something that we have to realize is happening in Orange County. We don't, there's a lot of things that are happening under the radar, and I think we all have an opportunity to help stop human trafficking. That's what VietACT, the Vietnamese Alliance to Combat Human Trafficking, is about. The reason why we formed is because we have a large Vietnamese population here. And it's very easy for someone to kind of to blend into to Orange County, because we have such a diversity in Orange County. There's people from all over the world that live here, that have come here, have immigrated here, become U.S. citizens. So a lot of times we don't know these people are slaves, or these people have been human trafficked here, because they may look normal, like your neighbor. But that's where I think it's important that we need to be aware of what human trafficking looks like.
Is the cultural barrier, the distrust of the American system, a problem for you in the Vietnamese community?
I think that, the Vietnamese community, those that came here after 1975, which is after the end of the Vietnam War, came from a country that was not only torn apart by war, but after the war, the communists took over. A lot of the folks that came here were people that were prosecuted under the new communist government. So there is a distrust of government in general, but I think with America, with the United States government, I don't think it's so much there's a distrust, because I think I know from my parents, they're very grateful to be here. The comparison between living in a democratic country versus a communist country is very clear and apparent. But I think the folks that are potential victims are people who have lived in Vietnam after 1975. They may have come here on some kind of visa, or have been tricked here, lured here on a tourist visa, and then overstayed their visa. So they may be distrustful, because not only do they not know the language, they don't know the system. They haven't lived here. So that's a different population, even though they may be Vietnamese, but they came here afterwards, and they came here to look for work or promises on a better life.
Well, and the threat of prison. I mean, I know we've seen cases where they were told, I'll turn you into INS, and INS is going to put you in prison, and the idea is it's generally not going to happen, but of course they're convinced it will.
Yeah.
How regular is this going on from the international to the U.S., and then let's talk more specifically about Orange County? Well,
according to the United Nations, there are probably about 4 million people living in slavery around the world. That includes women, children, and men. They're living in some form of slavery. And then in the United States, it's probably about anywhere between 600 to 700 that are trafficked into the United States. And so human trafficking is a very big problem. It's also a problem where we really don't know the exact numbers, because it's such a shadowy, business, and I hear often that, with drugs and arms, so those are the two biggest illegal trade, trade in drugs and arms, but very soon the trade in human lives, human beings, is going to surpass the trade in arms and drugs, because different from drugs and arms is you can only sell, drugs once. And weapons, maybe you can sell once or twice, but with the human lives, you can sell them over and over and over again. So these criminal syndicates have a very strong incentive, a lucrative incentive to sell